So hello, Kim here from KimKnightHealth.com, and it's been a while since I've done a Facebook Live, and I just felt like doing one. I woke up this morning and thought, wow, there's just some really good information I want to share here. And what I want to cover is 9 ways we can stop our self-healing process, which keeps us ill, and how we can actually sabotage getting well without even realizing that we're doing that. So why am I sharing this? Well, because I want to help people see and understand new possibilities and new avenues for healing, especially if you're not getting the results that you want, or if you're stuck, or if you're looking for new solutions. Because one of the things that is very common is that we can be trying something and it's not working. And maybe we're going down what I call the mainstream model of conventional medicine, and we just know that we want to do something different, but we don't know where to look or where to start. And this was what it was like for me when I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and sent home by the doctor after the diagnosis saying, well, you know, there's nothing we can really do. There's no known cause for chronic fatigue. You just have to go home and rest. And I was just completely lost. I just didn't know where to look. And so it's so important to know that there are other solutions and other options out there, and to start knowing where to look. And very importantly, you know, if anybody is watching this now or later on demand, if you're at this place where you're just absolutely fed up with what's going on, you've tried lots of different avenues, nothing is working, and you're getting despondent, I want to give hope, because it is so, so important to have hope if we're ill, and especially if we're chronically ill, chronically sick, and we've been ill for a long time. It can really affect our mind and how we feel, and it can be hard to keep our spirits up. So it's really, really important to have hope. And in order to have hope, we need to know that there are answers out there to the problems that we're looking for a solution for. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this webinar was that I was recently at a conference, the International Holistic Cancer Symposium, and I was speaking, and I was speaking there with Bruce Lipton as well, who's an amazing man who's written The Biology of Belief, and he's doing such amazing work in changing people's understanding of illness. And if you haven't heard of Bruce Lipton, he basically proved scientifically some 40 odd years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that genes are not affected so much internally, but more actually by what happens in our environment. So you can check his book out, Biology of Belief. But anyway, I was at this conference, and so it was an international conference, a holistic conference on alternative solutions to cancer treatment. So rather than chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, etc., that all the speakers were presenting new possibilities and new options for, well, what could I do if I don't want to do those things? Because, you know, sometimes we're fine with doing those things, but if we don't want to do those things, then we want to know other options. So people were obviously coming for other options than the traditional conventional method. But what really interested me was I watched how people still were thinking that the cause of the physical symptoms had to be, or could mainly be dealt with through a physical solution. So people were still looking for something physical to resolve their symptoms. So they were, for example, they were going and checking out the tables, the exhibition tables where people were selling some sort of herbal remedy, or maybe a mat to lie on, which will, affect the energy of the body. And I'm not saying these things aren't good, but what I clearly saw at that conference was that people were still not truly understanding how much illness is created internally through our thoughts, through stress, through traumas that have happened in our life, that all affect the chemistry of our body. All these things like negative emotions, negative thinking, limiting beliefs, trauma that's happened in the past, plus also our current lifestyle and our behaviors and what we could call self-damaging behaviors, how much these things actually contribute to the creation of illness. And I saw very clearly that people were still, even though they were at a holistic event, they were still looking for a physical solution to the physical problem. And as you're going to see in this presentation, so much physical illness is not created originally by something physical. We've got to look beyond the physical to get the answers. So I'm going to go through these blocks to what I call the blocks to healing. And number one is beliefs. So my question to you is, what do you believe is possible when it comes to healing? Yeah, and what I mean by that is, what approaches do you think is possible? And for example, do you think it's possible for the body to get well without an external intervention? Have you ever asked yourself this question, or do you just take it as read and take it for granted that you have to take something externally, whether it's a supplement or a medication or maybe have surgery? Is that your paradigm? Is that your belief? So, for example, do you believe the body can heal itself? Do you believe the body has made a mistake if you're ill? Do you believe that physical symptoms are caused by something physical? Because if you don't believe the body can heal itself and you think the body has made a mistake and that illness is just random, and you keep thinking that physical illness is caused by something physical, then A, that is a belief, but it's also a limiting belief because it doesn't look beyond that. It limits you, and that is going to limit the choices that come your way in terms of finding things to heal. And it's going to limit the options, that you find for solution. It's going to limit in many ways. So it's really important to ask ourselves the question, what do I believe about illness and healing, and what do I believe is possible? Now, if we remember a few centuries ago, not that long ago, people really, truly believed that the world was flat. Now, anybody now would think that was laughable, right? Just unbelievable. But people literally believed this, right? And then it was discovered that actually the earth is round. And slowly, people believe that. And then at some point, everybody believed that. And this is what it's like with health and the healthcare system, is that there are a few people like myself who know that there are other options for reversing illness, but because it's still not, most people don't believe this yet. Most people are still believing that it's something physical. We have to look for something physical. It's a physical cause. It's a physical solution. We still haven't made that leap yet, that shift into everybody understanding actually a new reality. So if we talk about reality and physical matter, what are your beliefs about the nature of reality and physical matter? Because most people do not realize that they've been living and still are living in an idea that we're solid, right? Now, quantum physics has since proven that even physical matter is actually energy. So if you put a cell of a human body or a particle of a tree or a blade of grass or even a desk under a microscope and you magnify it 1,000,000 times, it will no longer look like physical energy. It will look like energy. It will no longer look like physical matter. It will look like energy. And we've been brought up in a world where, certainly in the Western world, where we think the physical matter is really solid, but actually it's not. It's solidified energy, right? Now, energy is in waveform, and it becomes solid when it gets given attention. And this is why, for example, they found that when scientists do experiments, depending on the person who's doing the experiment, there will be a different outcome, because the experimenter, or the person, you know, leading that experiment, literally affects the outcome of that experiment. So whether it's the scientist or whether it's the people participating, there's going to be a difference according to the mind and the attention of that person. So everything is relative. So this field is known as quantum physics or quantum science, and it has radical outcomes for, you know, how we understand illness and how we approach illness and how we understand, you know, how to restore health if we become ill. Because understanding matter as energy and the interchangeability of the two changes everything. All right, nothing is just physical matter anymore. We have to look beyond this so we move from the physical to the metaphysical. And meta just means beyond physical. We have to look at other components to our whole being, rather than just looking at the physical body. So matter can turn into energy, and energy can turn into matter. And what is it that then creates matter, and what is the energy which creates the matter? And a lot of that has to do with our thoughts and our feelings and things like stress. All of this affects the physical body. It all changes and affects our physical matter. So what are your beliefs about the physical body? Do you take into account the effect that thoughts and feelings have on your physical body? Do you recognize that when you have emotions, and Candice Pert wrote about this in her book, Molecules of Emotion, do you recognize that when you have emotions, they literally change the chemistry inside your body? So for example, when you're feeling happy and full of love and full of peace, that literally creates secretions inside your body. It affects literally the cellular function of every cell inside the body, which leads to a physical result. As opposed to if you have lots of fear and lots of anger and resentment and sadness and grief inside your body, that is creating a different concoction or cocktail of emotions and secretions inside your body, which is having a different effect on the cells and literally changing cellular form and function, right? So our thoughts, our negative thinking or our positive thinking, our emotions, which is our negative emotions and our positive emotions, they literally change the cells. At a quantum level, they're changing things energetically. They're changing the vibration, the frequency, the resonance. At a physical level, they're changing things in the chemistry of the cells. And we're made of trillions of cells, and those cells become organs and tissues. So our thoughts and our emotions change our physical body. And this is so, so important to understand if we want to get well. Because if we're not taking this into account and we're only looking for a physical solution to the physical end result, then we're not looking at things from a holistic point of view, and we're not taking into account everything that has to be taken into account. And that is why people get stuck. That is why people are not getting answers or results. So, for example, a couple of years ago, I was working with a lady who came to see me who had been in hospital for 3 months undergoing many, many tests for many different types of symptoms, many different symptoms, seemingly inexplicable symptoms like nausea, vertigo, headaches, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, a whole range of symptoms. And the doctors were doing physical tests to look for a physical cause. And after 3 months, they found nothing, absolutely nothing. And she was at her wit's end. She had 2 children and she couldn't look after them. And so she had to, her and her family had to move out of their home and move in with the in-laws, because she literally couldn't function and she couldn't look after her children. And in our first session, we isolated the emotional causes and the stress which had created her body to go into such a state of dis-ease, it was creating disease. And then we worked on reversing those things, the emotional things, the stress, the beliefs, the habits. We worked on reversing all of that. And as we did that and we took away what had been creating the dis-ease, her body moved back into a state of natural ease and the symptoms went away. And then she was able to, after a few months, she was able to move back in, they were able to move back out, into a home of their own again. So the question is, what are your beliefs on this matter about the physical body, and whether it has made a mistake? Is illness a mistake, or does it have meaning and purpose? Because one of the things I like to say is illness doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. Your illness is trying to give you a message about something that is going on in your life that needs addressing. And the question is, do you know how to decipher that message? And most of us don't know how to do that. And I certainly didn't know how to do that until I learned how to do that through many, many trainings and then applying it on myself. So block number 4. What was, inverted commas, programmed into you as a child? And I don't mean you were sat down and put in a room and put on some machine and something was programmed into you. We're automatically programmed by the age of 7. We just sponge everything up like a sponge or a sponge when we're a child from our environment. And this is very much what Bruce Lipton is talking about when he talks about the environment. We just model ourselves on the people around us. We feel the energy of all the people around us. We take everything on automatically from the moment we're born, and even actually it starts in the womb. So this programming is from our family, it is from the culture we've been brought up in, the country that we grow up in, the society that we grow up in, our education, our religious conditioning. All of these form programming, and these are what actually create our beliefs, but also our habits and our behaviors, right? But it all happens unconsciously. It's like, did you question, or have you questioned your programming from your early childhood? So for example, were you taught certain rights and wrongs, such as obey thy father and thy mother, even if they're damaging you? Because this is one of the causes that I've noticed with people who have chronic illnesses is, for example, they might have been taught, well, I have to put up with unfair treatment from people because these people know better than me, or they're superior, to me, they're an authority to me, and therefore I have to put up with it. But the thing is, if we're tolerating unfair treatment or abuse or bullying, which is very, very common as a cause for chronic illness, even if it turns up later in life, then what is happening inside the body is there is a huge amount of stress being created, and there are a lot of negative emotions, which are actually what I call body emotions. They're survival emotions, such as frustration and fear and anger, which are coming because our body is telling us, I'm not okay with that. That is not okay. It is not okay for me to be treated like that. But if we don't notice those feelings, they just get stored up inside of us. And if we come back to the fact that we are an energy being, our physical body is solidified energy, our thoughts are energy, our emotions are energy, and the fact that energy cannot be destroyed, it can be transformed, but it can't be destroyed. When these emotions are generated inside the body, if they're not dissolved or dealt with immediately, they just stay stuck in the body. They get stored inside the body, or we could say trapped inside the body, and then they start to have their effect at a quantum level on the cells. They start to rewire the cells into a state of dis-ease. What is your conditioning, and could your conditioning be getting in the way of getting well without you even realizing it? And if, by the way, you have resistance to what I'm saying right now, ask yourself, is it potentially because of some mind conditioning or a belief about what is wrong or right? Okay, because we can have very strong beliefs about what is right or wrong in the world, about how we should do things, how we should think, but we don't even realize that it's a programming and that actually it could be different, that there is choice, that we can change our beliefs and we can even let go of our conditioning. So the next block, physical cause of illness, which I've already spoken to about a bit already. So have you been told or taught, and do you subscribe to the belief that physical symptoms are caused by something physical? For example, do you focus on perhaps nutrition? It's like, well, if I eat better, then I'll get well. Or if I exercise more, I'll get well. Or perhaps virus and germs, like I'm sick, got chronic fatigue because I had a virus and I was never well after that virus. These are just a few examples of some physical causes. We could also talk about toxins, like herbicides and pesticides and that sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying that these aren't contributory factors. In my What Causes Illness program, I go into great detail of the different levels and contributing factors to physical illness. So I look at the physical, the emotional, the mind, the soul, environmental, all sorts of contributing factors to illness. And everybody has to work out what it is for them, which is, sometimes not so easy. But one of the prevailing paradigms, if you like, in our society, in our Western society, is that physical illness is caused by something physical, and it will either be something to do with our food or our exercise or toxins in the environment, or maybe a virus and germs. Now, for example, one of the things that I learned a long time ago was that a virus is what I call the last straw. It is not the cause. So let me share my story of what I'm, demonstrating the truth of this. I got, at one point, I got a really bad virus. I was very, very sick, sore throat, high temperature, etc. And I was ill for about a week, really, high temperature when you have the really bad symptoms, for about a week. And I went to the doctor and they said, yeah, well, you just got a virus. You just have to wait it out and, get better. So I came through the virus and thought that, okay, I must be getting better. But I just never seemed to get fully better. And I was just exhausted. I just could not get my energy back. And this went on for a month. And meanwhile, I'd taken leave from my job and I wasn't working. And this went on for a month. And I just did not have the energy to get back to work. And the company rang me up one day and they said, listen, you've had a month off work, and if you don't come back next week, then we're going to have to let you go. And so I forced myself to go back to work, even though I was still feeling exhausted. And, slowly I started to get better still, but I never really got fully better. And I was actually still getting tireder and tireder and tireder, until one day I walked into work and I quit on the spot because I just couldn't go on. And at that time I thought, well, it's the virus, right? I had a virus and I never recovered. And that's why I'm tired all the time. It's because I've never got well from the virus. Now, as I learned through all the studies that I did after that, actually the virus was the last straw effect. It was my body taking me out after years of stress and pushing myself too hard and not taking care of myself, and in big part not taking care of my emotions, storing a whole heap of emotions inside of me, which had created fatigue. Because one of the big misnomers of chronic fatigue, for example, is that it's a lack of energy. Well, there may be a lack of energy from the adrenal fatigue part of it, which comes from pushing ourselves too much, not listening to ourselves, not taking care of ourselves, overdoing it, overworking, trying to please people, overachieving, all these sort of things. But a big part of chronic fatigue is blocked energy, and specifically it's blocking our emotional energy, which we don't know we're doing. It's all completely unconscious. So what happens is we're just pushing ourselves and also ignoring our emotions for a long period of time, and this could be years. It could be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and our body is slowly sort of weakening and the immune system is weakening because we're just putting so much stress and strain on it, and our body is constantly trying to operate in the stress response, which it can't do long term. And then it's just like the last straw that broke the camel's back, and we get a virus. And that actually is really intelligent, because it's the body opening itself up to the virus so that we get taken out, inverted commas, so that we can't literally kill ourselves through the overachieving and the overdoing that we've been doing. So we have to look beyond the physical if we want to really understand what creates physical illness. Yes, there may be contributing factors at a physical level, but it is only a percentage of, the total cause. Maybe 20%. It's hard to put a number on it because it's going to be different for every person. Also some people think, well, there's no real cause for illness. And really we haven't been taught, what are the causes for illness? Now, this was the same for me. I had no idea that there were actually reasons for being ill. I just thought it was random. So, for example, when I was in my 20s and I hurt my back, I never had a clue until I found out 20 years later that it was because I felt unsupported. Now, I'm not saying this is the only reason for pain in the back, by the way, but this was, what it was for me. It was all around feeling unsupported, and so my back created a weakness, because there's always a metaphysical correlation with the physical symptom. And so I never even questioned, well, why has my back gone out? And I never knew that there was a beyond physical reason for my back going out until many years later when I resolved it. And when I resolved that, no problems anymore with my back, right? So, it's not true that as we get older, our problems can get worse and our physical health can go downhill. No, it doesn't have to be like that. So, have you been taught that illness is a mistake? Do you think that illness is random and a mistake? Or do you actually ask yourself, I wonder what my body could be trying to tell me through these symptoms? Because this is what we have to ask. We have to ask ourselves, what is the message and the meaning in these symptoms? Because my body is far too intelligent to make mistakes. So what is it trying to tell me, right? It's not speaking in words, it's speaking through symptoms. And in my videos and my video trainings, I teach people how there's these 3 levels of communication from within the body that build up to symptoms. So you can check those out in my programs and maybe videos on YouTube. So also, have you been told that symptoms can be part of the self-healing process, and that sometimes symptoms are a sign the body is already healing itself? And that therefore interfering with drugs or surgery could potentially prevent the completion of this self-healing process. So have you been told that symptoms are actually part of the body trying to heal itself? Have you ever looked at it from this perspective? Do you just think that the symptoms are a mistake, they're wrong, the body is doing something bad, and then you just try and fix it with some medication or some surgery? Or do you actually ask yourself, that's interesting. Do I actually know what part of the natural healing cycle my body is in right now? And therefore, maybe these symptoms are a sign that I'm actually healing. So here's a really simple example of this. Say you're really busy at work and you've had this project that's been going on for 3 months, and you're working 14 hours a day, never having any rest. You're absolutely exhausted. You get home at night, you crash out, and then you get up and you start it all over again, and you keep doing that day after day after day, which basically means that your body's in huge stress, under pressure. Maybe you're not feeding it properly. Maybe you're not drinking, enough good water. You're not taking care of yourself, and you're just over demanding on your body. And then the project finishes and you go on holiday. And you're going, wow, now I can relax finally and have some fun. And then you get sick. You get a cold or you get the flu and you find yourself really sick. Now, this is perfectly natural. This is the body doing what it needs to do to self-rectify, to self-heal, to bring back the yin-yang balance. Because yang is the doing and the activity, and yin is the rest and the regeneration. And just like we have seasons, you know, summer, winter, autumn, spring, and nature knows that it has to rest in winter, which is, you know, all the leaves drop and the sap goes into the center of the tree to regenerate so that it can grow again in the spring. Well, unfortunately, many humans have forgotten that we need rest and regeneration, but the body hasn't forgotten. Thank goodness, because otherwise we would literally kill ourselves through overdoing it and overwork. So the body takes us out. It takes us down with a flu, with a virus, because it needs to have a balance of activity and regeneration and rest. And so that is perfectly normal to get sick. And then we think, oh, there's something wrong. My body's made a mistake. So what I'll do is I'll try and ignore these symptoms, and I'll take some medication to take away the symptoms and to take my temperature down, and so that I can get on with having my holiday, right? Now that is not giving the body the rest and regeneration it needs. Now this is happening all the time in many, many illnesses, is that the body is actually in a self-healing process, but we don't know it. And one of the reasons it's not completing the self-healing process is because we're not dealing with the stress and emotional lifestyle causes of what created the stress and the illness in the first place. So do you know that your body is a self-healing machine designed to self-heal? And have you been told this? Now, we know that, for example, if we cut our finger, we automatically assume it's going to heal, or if we break an arm and it gets put in a cast, a plaster cast or a sling, we trust that it's going to heal, even though it's been put in the plaster cast. The body is actually doing the healing. But do you know that your body can heal more than just a cut finger or, you know, a broken bone? Our body is a self-healing machine, but do you know it? Do you know this? This is so important to question if you're stuck, you know, getting well from some symptoms or illness. So what I see, and I didn't know this 20, 30 years ago. I didn't know any of this, right? It's taken me a long time to learn this information, and I've learned it through trial and error. I've tried about 250 therapies myself. Many of those to get myself well. I've trained in 20 cutting-edge therapies now. I have a massively different understanding of illness from what I had 30 years ago. So don't feel bad if you don't know this stuff. But the reality is, very sadly, and this is why I like to do what I do and teach what I teach, is that there is a lot of misinformation out there in the world about what causes illness and how to resolve it. A lot of misinformation. So it's all about changing our understanding of things and upgrading and evolving our understanding of what is real and true. Now, I talk about this a lot in my Which Healthcare and Therapies Are Right For Me program, where I go into detail in talking about the different levels of consciousness that we can have that really affect our understanding of illness and what therapies are available out there. So we have to find our own solutions and answers, and the point is we have to do our own research and question what we're told. And very importantly, if something doesn't feel right, trust your intuition, which is your inner tutor, and find another way. So for example, when I was 28, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. And at the time, I'd just started doing some counseling with a counselor. And it was the first time in my life that I started to question or understand that I had these things called feelings, and that perhaps I hadn't been as happy as I thought I was in my childhood. And this is quite common actually for people with chronic illness. When I ask them sometimes, you know, how was your childhood? And they go, oh, my childhood was fine. Well, actually, if you have a chronic illness, bearing in mind that in my experience, 100% of chronic illness is set up in the first 7 years of life, well, there has to be something there that actually wasn't quite so good. Actually, let's say 99%. I never like to say 100%, But what I will say is that in 100% of the clients that I've worked with, the foundation for chronic illness was set up in the first 7 years of life. So I was in hospital, and of course, I didn't know what I know now. I knew very little. I didn't know anything about, other solutions to healing. I didn't know anything about myself. And the doctors wanted to give me medication. And I just had this feeling, even before they gave it to me, that I didn't want it, but I started taking it. And after about 3 days, I noticed that my brain fog got even worse, and I felt even worse. And there was something inside of me that said, I don't want to do this. And because I'd self-admitted myself, I was allowed to, to make that choice. And so I stopped taking the medication. And I just knew there had to be another way. I didn't know what the other way was, but I just knew there had to be another way. So what I was doing, unbeknownst to me, was I was trusting my inner intuition or my inner tutor and following that guidance. And when I work with people, I teach them how to use this intuition, which is part of the heart and the gut brains, as opposed to just listening to the head brain. So we each have to find our own solutions and answers. So the next block is awareness. Now, self-awareness changes as our consciousness evolves, and awareness is connected with our world paradigm, which is, what we believe to be true about reality, and also what we believe is possible. Albert Einstein said reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And if you're familiar with magicians like Dynamo or Uri Geller, they have a very different view of what is possible and what is reality, right? So, while some people will be watching Dynamo and thinking, wow, that must be some sort of magic trick, I'm watching him going, wow, that's really interesting that he has the power to be able to do what he's doing, because his reality is completely different. So our awareness can change in a number of ways. And when we change our awareness, we have a new view of things. We have a new perspective. And what we previously thought was, reality is no longer our reality. So, for example, 30 years ago, my reality around health was, well, you get sick and you go to the doctor and you either have a surgery or a medication. You never question anything. The body has made a mistake, and that's just how it is, right? There was nothing more that went on in my mind. But then I had a life-altering mind expansion experience, which expanded my reality very abruptly. And all of a sudden, I started discovering new approaches and new perspectives, which I'd never known of before, even though they were already there. They were there, but I just hadn't seen them and I hadn't come across them. So we can expand our awareness of what is reality and what is possible and what is true through personal development training. If we go on lots of workshops, then our awareness is going to expand and change. And then it can sometimes happen spontaneously through things like accidents or illnesses or traumatic events or near-death experiences. When people have these experiences, they can literally wake up from one day to the next and have a completely different view of reality. So the point of bringing this up as a block, awareness being a block, is that if our awareness is only a small compared to a larger, more expanded version, it can actually prevent us seeing possibilities, seeing new ways of approaching things. So the next thing that is really important to understand is what we call self-damaging behavior. So when we continue habits which perpetuate stress, we exacerbate symptoms and we also halt the body's natural self-healing process. So we can be doing a lot of things in our daily life, in our daily lifestyle, through our habits and behaviors that we have no idea are actually contributing to stress inside the body, and therefore contributing to the dis-ease inside the body. And so if we continue to do these habits, then we're going to make the symptoms worse, which is what exacerbate means, And we can also stop the self-healing cycle that the body is trying to complete, because the body is always trying to complete self-healing cycles. And we can have multiple cycles going on at any one time, but the body is always trying to complete it. But if we are damaging ourselves, then we're going to prevent that happening. For example, similar to the example I gave before, if we're working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, never resting or taking time out, driving ourselves, keeping going, exhausting ourselves, never taking breaks, not eating properly or drinking properly, that is self-damaging behavior. Now, it might be the norm, it might be a habit, but it's not natural. It doesn't flow with nature. It doesn't flow in harmony with what our body needs in order to maintain homeostasis and health. Because the body has needs. It needs to be looked after. And if we look after our body will look after us. It's a two-way street. So another example of a damaging behavior might be we always put ourselves last on our to-do list. We're doing everything for everyone else. We're never taking time out for fun or hobbies. We're ignoring our own needs. So this is very, 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 very common with people with chronic illness. And what we have to do, obviously, is we have to start changing this around. Another example of damaging behavior might be we're in a relationship where our partner is being mean and unkind and cruel, maybe even abusive, and we continue to tolerate it. This creates stress, worry, anxiety, fear, frustration, hurt, a whole heap of emotions inside of us. And if we suppress those emotions, they're going to have that effect that I described earlier in the cells. It's going to have an effect on the cells, which turns dis-ease into disease. So we're going to have to change this. We're going to have to identify what are these damaging behaviors, and we're going to have to change them. And the problem is, if we have a lack of awareness around what we're doing that's having an effect, then we won't be able to change it. So for example, I work a lot with women who have been bullied, abused, mistreated, treated unfairly, and it all started in childhood. It continues on as an adult because they don't know any different. And it's not until we really look at it and I point out and ask them, you know, do you really think this is fair? Is your body really happy with this? You know, how is your body responding? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it stressed? Is it relaxed? What is the effect that this treatment, either towards yourself or from other people towards you, what is the effect that is happening inside your body? Do you think this could be contributing to your illness? And the answer will always be yes. So we have to change this. So the next block is closed-mindedness. And the question is, if you're seriously ill or you've got symptoms that just won't go away, my question to you is, are you open to new avenues and new possibilities and new ways of looking at things? Are you willing to see things differently? So it was very interesting last week. I was speaking with somebody who's got severe symptoms of various different symptoms in deep discomfort and pain, both physically and mentally and emotionally, because, you know, it all goes together. And I said, are you ready to be open to a new possibility, to seeing some new solutions and new ways of, you know, approaching and understanding why your body is creating symptoms? And they said no. They said a very, very firm no. So this person was just not ready to open their mind to new possibilities. And this can be quite common, and it's very sad. It's very sad because basically it means that they stay in their suffering for the moment anyway. So the question is, if you seriously want to get well and things aren't working and you want some alternative solutions, are you ready to look at things differently? And if you say yes, then that's good, because then things will start to open up and new opportunities will start coming your way. If you say no, then that's just like closing the door and nothing is going to come through it. And when I work with people, I can only ever work with people who are open to new possibilities and are open-minded and willing and ready to accept new possibilities. And that was one of the key things for my own recovery, was to be willing to look for new solutions. So as Einstein said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, right? This is why we created the problem in the first place, because we had a certain way of thinking, and we can't solve our problems with the same thinking. And Buckminster Fuller, an amazing man, said, you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So we've got to look for new ways. Now, next one, focus of attention. Are you, for example, buying into the fear of what could be the worst case scenario outcome for your situation? Is your mind going down, oh my God, you know, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and it's like the most terrible thing ever that's going to happen, the worst case? And are you focusing on the illness and the symptoms rather than on being well? Now, this was quite a life-altering paradigm for me when I first understood, you know, the power of where we put our attention. Because as the saying goes, energy flows where attention goes. So if we keep focusing on the problem, it's more likely to eventuate or get worse. And if we keep focusing on the symptoms, then they're more likely to increase. Whereas if we focus on the solution, then we're more likely to get that. Now, there's science behind this, which I don't have time to go into now. But for example, if you cut yourself and you look at it and you go, oh my God, I'm bleeding, actually the first thing that we need to do is to look at that cut and go, it's healthy, it's completely healed, right? It's a very different way of approaching a symptom. So for example, if we have a headache, and now I know I've talked about we need to isolate the root cause, and we still have to do that, but we need to give what is called good, healthy information to that part of the body as quickly as possible, because it literally sends that information to that part of the body and it starts to program the cells, if you like, into healing. Whereas if we keep focusing on the problem and going, I've got a problem, I've got a problem, I've got symptoms, I've got symptoms, that sends energy there that actually exacerbates them. Now, for example, I remember 20 years ago being in a workshop and the trainer said, what do you think is going to happen if every day you are checking if you have a lump in your breast or under your arm? What do you think is going to happen? You're sending that energy of like, have I got a lump? Have I got a lump? Right? It's more likely potentially to create a lump. So we have to be very, very mindful of our thoughts, and we have to understand that thoughts create reality, that energy flows where attention goes. And so if you have a problem, even though we still have to identify and resolve the root cause, we can immediately start giving healthy information into that place, which is going to be helpful. It's sending positive, healthy information into that place in our body rather than sending negative, fear type information into that part of the body. Now, this is a big topic by itself. I'm just introducing these concepts here so that maybe, you know, if there's just one thing out of these 9 blocks and you go, oh, I'm doing that, I could change that, then I've done my job. And you know, this comes back to, well, am I going into fear or am I in a state of trust and peace? No matter what's going on, am I getting caught up in the fear, or do I experience trust and peace inside of me? And we actually have a choice, and the more aware we become and the more tools we get under our belt and the more our beliefs change, so you can see all these 9 blocks, they all connect, these 9 concepts, they're all interrelated, is that the more our beliefs change, the more our awareness evolves. We can still have the same situation, but our approach to it is very different, and that will have an effect on the result that we have. So the next one is lack of trust, and this is huge. I've left this to last because this is absolutely huge. So my question to you is, in general, do you trust yourself? Do you trust your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your intuition? Do you trust yourself? Do you trust your decisions? Do you trust other people, or are you always suspicious and doubting other people? Do you doubt yourself? And do you trust the world at large? Because this is the concept, if you like, of trust, which is a huge issue for a lot of people. And when we're talking about health, the question is, do you trust your body to heal itself? Do you have enough trust in your body that it knows what it's doing, and as long as you work with it rather than against it, and you become partners, if you like, in your healing process, do you trust your body to heal? Because what happens for a lot of people is that they go into fear. They go into the worst case scenario thinking. They go into fear, which just creates more fear and stress inside the body, which is not conducive to healing. Now, in order to have trust, we need to have this bigger picture perspective of, okay, so I understand that my body hasn't made a mistake, that there are reasons probably for my symptoms, and that if I work out what those reasons are and I address those reasons and I stop damaging myself, and maybe I change some beliefs, and maybe I evolve my awareness, and all these nine concepts I've been talking about today, if we do all of that, then we increase our trust. So it's so important to trust that our body can heal. So as I said before, if we cut ourselves, we usually trust that our body will heal from that cut. And if we break an arm, we usually trust that our body will heal that broken bone. But if you have, say, chronic fatigue or cancer or irritable bowel, or whatever it is, whatever the label is that's been given to your diagnosis, ask yourself, do I trust that my body can heal? Because this is so important. We must start to trust our body. Because when we don't trust our body, it's like we're literally not trusting ourselves. And that is not conducive for healing. The body needs to know that we trust it. And it needs to know that we're going to listen to it, that we're going to understand it, that we're going to decipher the messages and the meaning behind the symptoms, and that we're going to make appropriate changes to bring our body back into a state of natural health. And that may mean doing some emotional healing, changing some lifestyle habits. It may mean whatever it is for us, because we have to work out what it is that we need, and that will be different for each person. But I'd really like you to ask yourself, do I trust my body to heal? And then maybe even put a percentage. It's like, well, is it 40%, 50%, 70%, 80%, or 100%? What faith do you have in your body that it is an incredible self-healing machine that is designed to heal itself, as long as we get out of our own way and stop damaging? So yeah, do you trust your body is intelligent and has wisdom? And do you trust that your body is too intelligent to make mistakes? Do you trust that illness is happening for you and not to you? Do you know your body is on your side? It's not against you. It's on your side, which is why, in our society, people are always saying things, well, I have to fight this illness and I have to fight cancer. And as one of my very wise teachers said, nobody ever wins a war. We have to get on the same side. So our body is not against us. We don't get rid of symptoms. We work out, well, why is it my body is sending them, and then take away whatever it is that's creating them. So a lack of trust in the body's ability to heal is one of the biggest blocks to healing. And really, fear blocks healing, and illness heals in the presence of love. So a lot of this also comes down to, are we in a state of fear, or are we in a state of love? If we're in fear inside our body, which means that we're in the stress response, we have a lot of unresolved fear from the past, we have a lot of patterns of thinking of fear, emotions of fear, then that creates a toxic environment inside our body where our body can't complete the self-healing cycle. And this is why it's so important to clear these patterns of fear. But when we have love and harmony and peace at a cellular level, harmoniously in our body, which comes through taking away anything that is blocking that, because the love is already there, it's always here, we are that love. But if the fear is in the way, then it's going to prevent us from actually experiencing being that love. Then we get blocked from healing. So illness heals in the presence of love, and we have to clear away whatever is blocking that natural state of love and peace and harmony, which is our natural state. So one of the most important steps that I've found to reverse illness, the key is self-love and self-care. It's all about taking care of ourselves, looking after our mind, our emotions, our physical body, our soul, spirit, whatever you like to call it, and really loving ourselves well. So to summarize these blocks to healing, there's our beliefs, conditioning, whether we think physical illness is just caused by something physical, lack of self-awareness, damaging ourselves, being closed-minded to new opportunities, where we put our mind, lack of trust, and fear versus love. So the solution then is with our beliefs. We need to change our limiting beliefs. We need to discover what they are. We need to clear them. Conditioning, we need, our programming from childhood. We need to become aware of what was our conditioning, what was I programmed, what are my beliefs, and question this, and then maybe change it. If we think that illness is just something caused by something physical, then we have to understand the role that stress, emotions, trauma, and lifestyle habits play in the creation of illness. If we want to grow our self-awareness, then we have to evolve our consciousness by doing something consciously, by learning about ourselves, taking personal development courses. If we want to stop the self-damage, then we're going to have to change our habits. We're going to have to identify what are the behaviors that are damaging myself and then change them. If we're closed-minded, then we have to be open and willing to be open-minded and embrace new ideas and approaches. If we have an unhealthy mind focus, then we need to change that to a more healthy mindset and learn how to manage our mind and our thoughts. If we have a lack of trust, we need to start trusting our infinite wisdom and body intelligence. And if we're stuck in fear as opposed to love, then we have to learn how to dissolve the fear and cultivate more love. And as I said, self-love and self-care are some of the most important steps that we need to take to reverse illness. And just doing this, and there are many ways to do this, can have a dramatic effect on reversing illness without having to use medication, supplements, surgery, etc., etc. Not that sometimes that isn't necessary. I'm not saying that this is a total solution and the only solution. I want to be very clear on that. There's many, many different approaches, but the problem is this approach of self-love and self-care is not nearly as well understood as it could be and should be and hopefully will be in the future. So for example, when I'm working with clients, I have what I call my 9 pillars of health mastery, and these all are dealing with self-care and self-love. So if we go through them briefly, stress management, we have to learn how to de-stress, which means we have to learn, well, what is it that's causing the stress in the first place? We have to look at the internal causative factors, the external causative factors, and we have to make changes. We have to look at our emotions and how we're managing our emotions or not. And are those emotions building up and turning from dis-ease into disease? We have to look at our lifestyle. How are we managing our lifestyle? What are our daily habits? What are we doing every day that is either putting the body into stress or keeping it in a natural state of harmony? And we have to make adjustments. We have to look at how we manage people in our life, because people can create stress and emotions inside of us, and we have to learn how to create, for example, boundaries and stop unfair treatment. We have to look at managing ourselves, which is all our self-care, and how we make ourselves our priority in our life. We have to look at managing our energy. How are we managing our energy on a daily basis? Are we wasting it and draining it away, or are we preserving it and building it up? We have to look at trauma, at dissolving trauma from the past, which is stored or trapped in the cells. We have to look at our soul or spiritual management. Am I on purpose? Am I on track on life? Am I being true to me? Am I doing what I came here to do? And we have to look at our mind. How am I managing my mind, my thoughts? What beliefs are there that maybe need clearing out because they're limiting me? So these are what I call the 9 pillars of health mastery. And when we're looking at health and illness, and certainly getting well from an illness, all of these need to be taken into account. This is truly holistic health. So if you're interested and you want more information, I'll just give you a couple of pointers here that are relevant to what I've been talking about. So I have some introductory programs, for example, which healthcare and therapies are right for me, which talks about the different levels of consciousness. But this program looks at helping you understand that according to your level of consciousness, you will either gravitate to or find certain therapies. For example, if up until now you've been thinking, well, illness has to be treated physically, a physical illness has to be treated physically, then you're likely to gravitate to a therapy which will be, physical. For example, you'll go to a doctor, maybe you'll go to a naturopath who, deals with supplements, or maybe you'll go to a nutritionalist who deals with nutrition. Maybe you will go to a physio who deals with muscles and bones, right? That is a physical level of healthcare. But there are other levels of healthcare. There are energetic levels and mind levels and consciousness levels. So as our consciousness evolves, we literally open ourselves up to more possibilities, and we will find out about therapies that we never heard of before. They were always there, but we didn't know about them. So that's the which healthcare and therapies are right for me. Then there's the 9 pillars of health mastery, which is, it goes into greater detail on those 9 pillars of health mastery, which I just described. That is a free program, so I recommend that you check that out. And then I have the 8 milestones of self-healing, which goes into great detail to describe this self-healing cycle of the body, and how we have the stress and regeneration cycles, and how we, how symptoms can sometimes be a sign that we're actually in the regeneration phase. And I talk about breast cancer and prostate cancer, and how some symptoms of breast cancer, for example, have been shown to be the body actually in the self-healing phase, and the reason it hasn't completed itself is because the emotional component hasn't been resolved, but the body is already healing itself. Now there's a lot more in that program. You can see that on the page when you go to it. That's the 8 milestones of healing. And then a great program to check out would be the What Causes Illness, because that goes into many, many different contributory factors of what causes illness at a physical level, what causes illness at a mind level, an emotional level, a stress level, an environmental level, geopathic stress level. It's a very comprehensive program looking at the different contributing factors to illness, because we need to take so many things into account, and if we don't know what to look for or what may be contributing, we may be missing something that may be really, really obvious. For example, are you living over a ley line, a geographic fault zone, where you're living? Or, for example, are you living near a Wi-Fi cell, transmitting station? All these things can contribute to illness. And lastly, this is the introductory series here. But there is a full program where you learn how to cultivate trust, love, openness, gratitude, and other essential qualities of the heart. Because we need to cultivate trust and love and openness in order to open our hearts so that we have a two-way communication between us and other people and us and the world. So very difficult program to describe in 10 seconds because there is so much to it. But if you go into the introductory Tongwan program, there is an hour-long, at least, webinar describing what this is really about. And it's really about transformation from the inside out and transforming our heart and our heart energy, which transforms everything else. And then lastly, also, if you really want to get to the root cause of your illness, then come and have a breakthrough experience session, which is all about identifying the root causes of whatever is turning up in your life, whatever the illness, whatever the diagnosis. We'll get to the root of it and isolate those root causes in one go. So this can save you a lot of time and a lot of money because we just do it all in one go. And then after that, you know, it's all about solution, solution, solution. So you don't have to keep going to multiple different people to understand, well, what is causing my problem? So I hope that has been useful and interesting. I love sharing life-changing information that can really help people get a different perspective so that they have different solutions and possibilities and have a lot more hope, as I said at the beginning of the webinar.